Views expressed by Casters Guild members are only the opinions of that member, and that could change from day to day. Guild members may use mature language, but that in no way means they are mature. Listener discretion is advised.
It's that spooky time of year, and sometimes we need to get even more involved than just movies. So here's how we get our scares while sitting safe at home. And that's the spell we're casting tonight on Casters Guild.
I don't know. I think we should Polanski this. At least 82 more takes. Let's do this.
Not Kubrick, 127?
No, God, no, not that one. Jeez. You think I am a monster?
I mean, a little.
Well,
All right, on that note, thanks for tuning into this episode of Casters Guild. I am your guild master, and I didn't think of something this time, Rick Perry.
And I'm Baron. I never think of something, Kane.
And joining us tonight are two guild members who've been with us before. Feel free to introduce yourselves.
go right ahead.
Okay, Kat Seguin, resident spook mistress. Just, all around spoopy lady. I do a horror video game Twitch stream Tuesdays at 8, and I played a lot of horror games. Used to be on a tabletop podcast, and I got a lot to say.
I'm Mike Stewart, resident board game geek, though that might be trademarked somewhere else. But
Oh, wait, yeah.
yeah, somewhere.
If you do a pause, board game geek.
Oh, wait, hyphen. You put a hyphen in it, you're good. It's good.
There we go. We'll
Board game hyphen
like Spider-Man. Yeah, we'll hyphenate it like Spider-Man. You're a board game geek.
Night monkey.
I kind of want to get you a T-shirt now.
Board game -geek, the spectacular board game geek.
Oh man,
The bombastic board game geek.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to have someone work on the cover for me.
All right, so let's start with the question that we often start off with, and we're going to say, what's your favorite horror game? Now, we all have had experience with both video games and tabletop games, so we can say both what's your favorite horror video game and what's your favorite horror tabletop game.
As long as it has nudity, it's... Oh, you're saying horror. Got it.
This is where the episode where enunciation really matters, and that's my own fault.
I actually came in here prepared for something completely different. So, whoops.
All those notes for no reason.
Yep, all that research I did, that exhaustive research. Oh man.
No, we can make it work. We'll make it work. We'll make it work.
So you're coming in completely unprepared, so it's just like every other episode.
Consistency is key. I'm going to defend him here and say, as long as you're consistently unprepared, you're prepared by being inconsistent.
All this. It's so good. I love it.
Well, it's funny, dodging the question, but thinking of sexuality and how it ties to horror. There is so much, particularly in American games, but also in Japanese games. Those are the two main categories I'm focusing on, where sexuality is just in your face and it's considered horrifying because it's breaking a taboo. And with that being said, my current favorite horror game, they rotate through, but my current favorite horror game has got to be Silent Hill 2.
No, I knew you were going to go dummy thick on this one, and I'm not disappointed.
Listen, the clap of my brain cheeks. Alert guards. No, so funny story about that. I freaked out the midshipman I was being with. I was doing volunteer effort, and I emerged from the woods, my hair all scraggly, carrying a strange stick, talking about something. And one of them said, "Do you just speak in essay format? Are you a cryptid?" I was like, "Listen, I don't have to answer any of these questions." And then I disappeared back into.
I'm pretty sure described a lot of weekends me and Mike had when we were younger.
At least 4.
At least 4. Just random appearances out of woods.
Hello, I have a story to tell you.
On fire.
I think that's how we met Rick, actually.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. But yeah, I'm gonna say that Silent Hill 2 is my current favorite horror game. However, I have not finished Silent Hill 4, and it's getting up there. It's getting up there.
The
So
room is pretty good.
other people can answer the question, or I can just keep talking.
Do you have a tabletop?
Oh, a tabletop horror game.
You don't have to. Just
Actually, I think the most fun I had was last Friday, or yeah, it must have been last Friday, where it's totally not Friday the 13th board game.
Mhm.
I loved it. I played it. I played a demo of it at Origins a couple of years ago, and then I as soon as it was available, I'm like, I want this game. And I haven't really played too much of it since, as that's the way things go. But it is currently my favorite horror game. I think the pacing is good. I think the gameplay is fun, and I think it has a lot of replay value, which is hard to find in a horror board game.
Mhm.
That's fair.
Yeah, I agree. I like that game a lot, and it's really a skin of an older game called Letters from Whitechapel, which instead of the Jason character, and I'm using quotation, you're Jack the Ripper.
Mhm.
Oh, interesting.
And the Jack the Ripper gets to kill a couple ladies of the night, and then the investigators go and try and find him. Which also kind of goes off to Fury of Dracula, kind of the same thing but based with cards.
Fascinating.
And even recently, Jaws, the board game, uses that same kind. The shark is hidden until it eats.
Okay, I like that. I mean, I feel bad for sharks, but they get such a bad rap.
Always root for.
All right, Mike. As per tradition, you're the other guest. So, what is your favorite horror video game or tabletop game, or both?
Well, video game, I have to go pretty old school in Left 4 Dead, or Left 4 Dead 2, either one. I'm probably 2.
Okay.
I love that. I mean, I haven't played it. That was so fun. Really had the horror. You felt like you were in a movie. I mean, that's the whole game. But it really had that, and you'd have those creepy sounds. But then that music would hit, and you knew it was on.
What I love about Left 4 Dead is a lot of horror games rely on the single player experience to make you feel isolated and afraid. And Left 4 Dead straight up pushed the multiplayer experience and said, this is meant to be played with 4 people. And it's still, I don't think you lose anything. I don't think it's any less scary because you're playing with your friends. If anything, your friends kind of play your fears off of each other if you got a good group of friends to play it with.
It feels like a game that would do well with the mass hysteria. It's similar to when people if you have a stand-up comedian, we'll put some people in the crowd that have an easy laugh. If you get people sort of laughing, then other people will go, oh yeah, that's supposed to be funny, and start laughing. It's kind of the same with a horror thing. If you get somebody who's scared, it hypes up other people to be scared as well. So if you're playing with friends who are already like, I don't know, it's a little scary, and then you sort of hype each other up, and it's a blast.
Yeah.
They've recently released a update for the computer version of Left 4 Dead. I think, what they say, 5 or 6 years later, they just a recent update to the game. It's still getting played, but still getting played. Tabletop wise, I think my current favorite is Horrified. If you're not familiar with Horrified, it's kind of a pandemic style co-op game, but instead of deadly viruses, it's universal monsters. Dracula, Wolfman.
Nice.
That's super cool.
Yeah,
I hadn't heard of that one, but that sounds.
Who put it out? Is it the same people as Pin?
No, it's actually by a company that's doing really well called Funko Games. So
Oh, Funko. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and but it comes from them, and it's very the same. Well, it's not exactly the same mechanics. You're pulling items out of a bag, but it's still kind of got that pandemic. You got to work together, and you can die very quickly.
I love cooperative.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, co-op gaming is the way to go. Once I hit 25 and on, I was just like, I'm so tired of competing with people. Can we just play together? Can we just be friends?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, that's it's funny because I thinking of Pandemic, I could put Pandemic Bioterrorist into the horror gaming group, because that shit's so real, it's scary. I think this year has proven to us that Pandemic the board game is, in fact, a biography of the planet right now.
Well, if you wanted to go more literal horror with Pandemic, they have a Call of Cthulhu Pandemic.
Yeah, I'd seen that actually. I hadn't played that version.
I like it better actually.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
What changes did they make? Is it just a skin change or?
It is a bit of a skin change, but it's also it's a smaller board, so it's not like the entire world or anything. It's essentially just like different points of the Lovecraft world, and there's portals opening up with monsters coming through them, and you have to eliminate the monsters and close the portal stuff.
Is this Arkham Horror?
No, this is
This is just Pandemic
Call of
Cthulhu.
Cthulhu.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay, because I know Arkham Horror does that, but Arkham Horror also takes like years to play.
Yes,
So
it does. Yes, it does. It literally took me years to learn. So there we go. Yeah, every time I picked up that book, I was like, no, put it down. It sat on my shelf for another year.
I get the joy of playing Arkham Horror or Arkham Asylum once a year at our friend's birthday party. Although we may not be able to play it this year because pandemic. But yeah, I get the pleasure of not reading the rules and just hoping that he's going to yell at me to do the right thing on my turn.
Oh, you're one of those people.
No, I usually tend to read the rules. But my dear friend is one of those people that like you must adhere to his interpretation of the rules.
Well, I will say the game is really easy. Everyone is on the same page, but everybody has to be in agreement of what that page is.
All right, Brad. So, what are your favorites?
Well, video game wise, I will say that I have a favorite, but I have two games that seek me out so much that I had to shut it off. Like it really hit me on a visceral level, like it was scary. Those definitely weren't my favorites. We'll talk about those later. My favorite video game horror is Resident Evil, the first one.
Okay.
It definitely hit a lot of buttons for me, especially considering like I was playing it with a friend and we played it all night, like overnight. So we probably hit the dogs bashing through the window around midnight. So it tells you how fucked up we were when that happened.
Well, that was a revolutionary for the genre, revolutionary for horror games in general. Like that was definitely a turning point.
Oh yeah, I'd never played anything like that before. And I don't think I'd ever seen a video game that was truly scary before that. So yeah, that was definitely good. And then I will say, board game wise, Dead of Winter.
Solid choice, yeah.
Dead of Winter. One, I love zombies. Two, cooperative game. It has a traitor element to it, which, again, if anybody's listening that's ever played Among Us, there you go.
It's a bit
You'll
sus.
love this game. Very sus. I love playing the traitor. I love it.
What I love about the traitor mechanic in Dead of Winter as well, and like, while Dead of Winter wasn't my favorite, if nobody else had brought it up, I would have brought it up during this, is you might not have a traitor.
Right.
You can draw cards and like, let's say there's 6 people playing, you draw 7 cards and only one of them is traitor. So if everyone draws a card, there's still a chance that nobody gets that traitor card, but everybody's still looking. You know what I mean? Like it really plays on that paranoia and you can find out that no one is actually the traitor.
We legit played a game one time, booted someone out, everything. It's like they don't die, they just get kicked out of the settlement.
They just get sentenced to death.
Correct. But we kicked them out, and to the very end, find out we didn't have a single traitor amongst them. We just got so paranoid that we kicked them out. So good.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
Then my favorite tabletop role-playing games, it's got to be Call of Cthulhu.
Oh, snap. I forgot to include tabletop RPG.
To be fair, I didn't ask.
Yeah, I didn't ask, but I had to. I had to throw that in there since that's kind of my gigs.
Legit.
All right, I'm going to say, and I won't spend too much time on them because I've already talked about these games to death on this podcast.
Yeah, you have.
But my favorite tabletop game is Betrayal. I've talked to death about that game already. Everybody knows how much I love that. My favorite TTRPG is going to be Dread. Once again, I've talked to death about Dread on this podcast. So
I still need to play it.
Yeah, the problem with that is like during the crisis, we don't have a way of playing that one remotely.
Right.
Dread has to be played in person due to that change score.
Yep.
Have you played Betrayal Legacy?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm very upset with Betrayal Legacy right now because I was about halfway through a season of Betrayal Legacy when the crisis hit.
Same.
Since then, our group has not been able to meet again to finish our season. And like I have been I've been a very good boy. I have not opened the box. I have not checked what's coming. I haven't looked at the story. I haven't looked at anything. So, like, I'm going to wait.
Your patience will be rewarded. As somebody who's played through a couple of seasons, each season end, you will be rewarded. It is beautiful.
If you know anything about the game, I'm going to try to tell you where I am without spoiling anything. We just got to a point where we unwrapped a new deck.
Oh, spoiled.
And that deck takes you to different places.
Okay. The last part I remember is that we found a thing in the box.
Yeah.
And we had to chant its name.
I mean, that's where you keep the game. So
we're a little bit past that point.
Okay.
So
yeah, but your patrons will still be rewarded. Their work on that game has been exemplary, I think.
Yeah, it's every game that we play. We're like, oh my god, we had no idea. So like, yeah, it's been great. And I've also played. I've got Betrayal. I've got the Widow's Walk. I've got Betrayal at Baldur's Gate, and I also recently picked up the Betrayal Scooby-Doo game. So,
I'm ashamed that I have not played Betrayal at Baldur's Gate yet.
It is really fun. I got to play it at Origins when they were first showing it with Shelley Mazanoble. She is a wonderful human being and deserves all the praise, by the way. And that game's a hoot.
Other people would disagree with me, but I do legitimately think you have to be a big D&D fan to get full enjoyment.
I disagree.
I will disagree with you.
Oh god, shit. I was doing it to be funny. Mike's being serious.
I know people would seriously disagree with me, but
hold on, Mike. What's your opinion on D&D?
Oh, I despise the game.
Wait, what's your opinion on just role-playing games in general?
Are they all the same?
That's all you need to say. That's all you need to say.
Which is terrible, except for one I want to bring up later. But
okay.
The Baldur's Gate. The only thing, really, the thing I hate about D&D is the actual role playing. So when I play Baldur's Gate, I can play D&D without the role playing, which makes me enjoy D&D.
Gotcha. Okay.
The only thing is, Betrayal Baldur's Gate has a ton of cut D&D references.
Yeah, it does.
But it's just like, so if you're playing Betrayal at the House on the Hill, if you're like a horror movie fan, like a horror genre fan, I feel like you can get a little bit more enjoyment out of it because you can get like references that they're making to certain things. You draw certain cards. Now, someone who knows nothing about it, I think, can still enjoy it to a certain level because it's still spooky, creepy, scary, but like you're not necessarily picking up on the reference. And the same thing happens with Betrayal at Baldur's Gate. There's a lot of deep cut references to where you're like, oh, well, that's a neat thing. But if you're somebody who's played D&D forever, you're like, oh.
Well, here's the thing though, is like I actually think that Mike loves D&D. I think he loves D&D. I think he loves the story of D&D because he also loves Lords of Waterdeep.
Yeah.
So I think the concept, the story of D&D is very attractive.
It's also possible that if you played the Baldur's Gate video enjoyment out of Betrayal at Baldur's Gate as well.
That's fair.
And if you're wanting to get into those kind of games, I think Betrayal is already pretty hand-holdy in how it teaches you how to play the game. But the Scooby-Doo version is even more it's obviously meant for kids.
Yeah, I've got it. I've played a couple games of it. One was good. One was meh. It kind of happens with Betrayal. Mm-hmm. Not all the scenarios are the best.
Right.
But I do have to say the components of Scooby-Doo are garbage.
Oh no.
They
really are.
They're garbage.
Are they like obviously 3D printed and never filed, or?
Oh, it's not even that. It's like they got the cheapest cardboard they could find to build your little disc that's got your, all your stats on it. I've played it twice. They look like they have been played 1,000 times because they are worn.
It kept it cheap though.
So kind of like the first edition of Betrayal.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, but it kept it cheap. It wasn't an expensive game, so like, I mean, I you got
to cut somewhere, I guess. But I mean, especially if you're dealing with licensed property like that, it makes things a little bit more expensive, a little more difficult.
Yeah.
And it's a fixable thing if you're crafty and you know how to do those things. But for the average, my thinking is, someone's never played board games, gets this game, and components are just utter garbage.
Right.
It's going to be hard for them to want to pay money and play another game.
Yeah.
Thinking that all components are that bad.
Right.
And components have come so far. It's funny. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you can have Kickstarteritis, where you have a mediocre at best game with beautiful components. They heard you loud and clear, and they made amazing components, but they forgot to work on the game. So.
I've ran into that way too many times.
And that's sort of one of the weird components of the modern age is that you can have these beautiful kickstarted pieces for a game that really needed to go through like 3 more rounds of testing.
Oh yeah, I've gotten a couple games like, I knew nothing about it. All I could read, all I knew about it was what I could read of it on the back and the cover. And I was like, oh, this looks amazing. And then I open it up and it's like, this looks amazing. And then I play it and it's like, this game sucks ass.
And for my last part of that question, I'll say my favorite horror video game. And once again, I'm not sure if everyone would say this one would count, but I'm going to say BioShock.
That counts.
Yeah, it's a strong choice.
Yeah, no, that's legit. That's completely legit. I mean, you take that storyline, you put it on a movie, and tell me that wouldn't be a horror movie.
Exactly. I think it's funny because like horror is so personal. There are universal symbols of horror, as we saw in Betrayal Betrayal, as we saw in all the horror movies that come out ever. But horror can be so deeply personal. It can be so effective when it's very personal. You can have, as we were talking about the sex stuff before, some people totally not bothered. Other people are rather uncomfortable at Pyramid Head having sex with a mannequin. It's kind of terrifying because that sure as hell wasn't consensual. And it's important to recognize what makes something scary for you, So like BioShock doesn't spook me at all because I take myself out and I go, oh, 'tis a video game. 'Tis a game where I stomp things multiple times. I shall win. 'Tis a game. But, looking at its separate components, like, yeah, it absolutely has horror elements to it. And I think I think you have a strong argument to make it a horror game.
Yeah, like if I was to just like watch Aliens or Alien or any of the Aliens movies, I'd be like, oh, that's a pretty good action movie. Anybody else would be like, that's a horror movie.
I would argue the first Alien leans harder into horror because of the cinematography, of the treatment of the script, and the treatment of the characters. Aliens, action movie. I love it. Like, this is not me going, ugh, it's an action. Like, no, action movie, 100% on board. It's awesome.
The one with Ron Perlman is definitely an action movie.
Oh yeah, Resurrection, which is a movie I enjoyed, even though it's terrible.
I liked it. I don't care.
It's terrible.
I like it.
But I think so. Like in Alien versus Aliens, what would make them different in terms of, since we can't look at the cinematography right now, we can talk about the other components. What makes Alien to me a horror movie versus a sci-fi action is that there is the isolation, to mention a video game, Alien Isolation. There's the isolation. There's playing upon other kinds of fear. We have the sexual fear where we have Ash trying to shove a porno mag down Ripley's throat. If that's not overt sexual referencing, then nothing is.
I went super metaphorical with the whole face hugger and the forced ovipositor.
And that's totally what it was meant. Geiger's art is absolutely bizarrely rapey and gross, but it's fascinating. And so you have things like, but to reach into some of the cinematography, because it's become a cultural touchstone, you have the isolated shots. You have Ripley standing alone in her underpants, oddly enough, in her underpants in a non-sexual manner, in just I am completely helpless manner. And you have the alien, just barely appearing on the edge of the screen. You have whole sequences where the alien doesn't appear, but you have the camera looking at things where it should. You have sounds happening where it should, where the alien should appear. I'm getting pointed at.
That would, I'm thinking of this in the context of a game, and the way you're describing this, you are describing it perfectly to go along with a game that we just talked about earlier, and that you talked about earlier with the whole Letters of Whitechapel.
Hidden movement.
Right, Hidden movement.
God.
That would be a beautiful game.
Oh my God, that movie great as that game. Like you're going around the ship and you're just going to different vents or different things.
And you're like trying to activate systems. And I played a game like that years ago called Omega Virus, where you were 4 astronauts. And the middle component was an AI that had gone rogue, and it would yell at you and like mock you, and you had to find the right key in the right order. I still have nightmares because we were trying to stop the game, and I was like, oh, I'll just take the batteries out. And as I'm reaching down to pull the batteries out by myself in the basement, it goes, ha ha ha, too late. And I'm like, oh God.
I love that game. Speaking of old games like that, anybody recognize this game?
Oh my god, yes, but like when I played it, it had a different title.
Yeah.
It came with a few different titles. I think it was called Nightmare when I played it.
This is
The
like-
VHS. So for those of you listening at home, Baron just held up Atmos, a VHS horror board game.
I'm sorry, what?
So in this board game,
Do we need a VCR to play this game?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
So in this game, you would set up your board, and then it came with a VHS tape, and you would take the VHS tape, put it in your VCR, and you had the gatekeeper or whatever he was called on that particular edition, and he would speak to you and tell you to do certain things. And basically, he was an advanced timer. Like you had so much time in order to the game. And each time you played the game, you might get a different color token. And then with your color token, you might get a different number that gets inserted into that token. And like in the middle of the game, you guys would be playing, being involved in the game. And all of a sudden the timer would turn to his face and he would yell at you, like scream at you. He'd say, stop. And like, this great big, and like whatever you were doing, you'd have to stop. And then he might fuck with you in some way. Like he might say, if your color is red or your number is 6, you cannot advance with the game until you roll a 7 on the die. Or like you like waste your time that way.
What Jumanji nonsense is that?
It was great.
Ridiculous.
And my favorite part of the game, the longer you play it, the more decrepit the gatekeeper's face would be. Like as the night went on, as he came forward on the screen, like eventually like he was like completely sunken in face. There were maggots crawling around his face, and like
and he started talking like
worse. Yeah, like it got really really creepy. And like I was in 3rd grade when I first played that game. So like that
was badly scarred for life for you.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
And just kind of like not on the subject of horror games. Next time you come over, I also have Dragon Strike. So
no, another VHS board game. I never played that one though. I would love to play that. If you've got a VCR ready, the next time I will totally play that. We might have to record us playing that game.
We'll have Mike over.
Mike, was there any success to this trend of VHS games, or were there just like a handful and everybody went, nope, this is terrible?
They made it
terrible.
They made enough. Yeah.
I mean, Atmosphere did well enough that they made several editions.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, I know there was Dragon Strike, there was Atmosphere, there was a cowboy one.
Yeah.
Where like the people would come on the screen and quick draw with you.
Yeah.
I remember that, and they had like a light gun that was set up with it, and so you play the tape, and then you just kind of followed along. And there was like the cowboy one, there was a SWAT team, and then there was like a ghost house one. And when you went to the ghost house, you'd have to shoot the ghost with your light gun.
Yeah,
but they had another one where you had like a spaceship that was a gun, and you had a little dude that was in there, so you would point it at the screen and you had to shoot particular targets with the light gun, but if it hit your end of the gun, it ejected your dude.
Oh, what?
It was great.
Wow.
That's nuts. We played a few.
That by you bringing that box out brought back some days, let me tell you.
Oh my goodness.
Like that.
Well, it's funny because we were playing some light gun games the other day, Ryan and I, and we were that's my husband, so we were playing one, and we were like, oh, we should broadcast this, and then we broadcasted it, and we were like, we need to have like 1,000 seizure warnings for these light gun games.
The spaceship one did come up as
it did. Okay, so it came out
it's surprising because this was in what grade was I in? I had to have been around like between 3rd and 4th grade.
So the Stone Age.
Yeah. Right? So I'm surprised they even cared back then. It would have been the 90s, I think, at that point. No, it was the late 80s.
Am I the baby on this cast again?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, I'm the baby on the cast. That's fine. That's fine.
So, before we get too far into light guns, I have to bring up a question.
That's another podcast.
I have to bring up a question that I told somebody I was going to be doing a podcast on horror games, and they brought up an interesting point that kind of formed this question. Okay, so if you're going to be playing a tabletop horror game, are you bringing out the tabletop horror game for your friends because you want to be scared, or you want to scare your friends, and why?
I bring out a tabletop horror game because I want to play a game.
Yeah.
And most of my library has very scary things. But I bring it out because I want to have the hysteria of. I was talking about that earlier. People sort of hype each other up. It's the same reason I go to like a corn maze or a haunted house, is that I might get a little scared, and my friend gets a little scared, and then I get more scared, and then we pick up on each other. And even if I don't get scared, my friends get scared. And that to me is hilarious. It's amusing. It makes for a wonderful story to tell later. So I do it because I'm a horrible person and I want everyone to be afraid all the time.
Yeah, I think I'm of the mind of I don't think I want to be scared, and I don't want other people to be scared. Not with a game. But if it just happens to be a good game and happens to be scary at the same time, then I guess that's just a byproduct. I guess. Yeah. I guess I'm the wrong person to ask that because I don't really like horror. So
I'm with you. I don't either, but to me, it's all theme. So if someone likes horror movies, if they like Friday the 13th, zombie movies, Walking Dead, I can pick one of those games and have a quicker connect with them in the game to get them involved, get them excited to play the game. If they don't like, if they don't like The Walking Dead, we're not going to bring out The Walking Dead games. We're probably not going to bring those games out anyway. Most of them aren't very good. But
I was going to say that's a whole other kettle of fish.
right.
The Telltale video games for Walking Dead, I have to say, I really, really like.
That's a different. Yeah, that's speaking of kettle. That is a different one as well.
I could argue that the Telltale games bring out a different aspect of horror that isn't so easily touched upon, and that's fear for the safety of others, which is hard to convey, and I'm really impressed with how well they did.
Yeah.
Because you have a little less fear for yourself because you're in this paced, talkative environment. But Clementine,
Right.
you fear for her safety, and that speaks so well of their writing, of their dialogue writing, of their characterization,
Mhm.
that it gives you that fear for the safety of others, which is it's a hard thing to do, quite frankly. You don't really see it in a lot of games.
In my opinion, in this series, they really carried that forward well, because as Clementine became you, like as you were Clementine later in the series, especially if you played the earlier games in the series, the decisions she makes and the decisions you make are based off the way she was raised, and she was raised in a way to see people want to care for her, and so she wants to care for other people, and it just kind of perpetuates that same feeling of wanting to care for it.
That's really cool.
in a video game, you can get that audio and the visual aspects that gets you into a movie like. I don't think it usually translates as well into the tabletop games unless there's like a spooky timer or something that can.
Or VHS tape.
VHS tape. Yeah. But there's several games that have spooky timers. What was that one?
Can we
Zombie.
just call them that from now on? Just spooky timers.
Love it. Spooky timers. I'm going to call all the clocks in my house spooky
All
timers.
of them.
What time does it say on the spooky timer?
Well, looks like the spooky timer's about out. We got to end the podcast.
It's time to be spooked. We ran out of spook. Well, I think, board games, I think, are going to be one of the more effective ways of bringing in fear for others' safety, especially like co-op board games like the ones that we were talking about.
I can almost make the argument, especially for some of those games, that even your fear for someone else's safety is fear for your safety, because if that person dies, you're next. Or
Right, absolutely.
it's like it's like that selfish fear of someone else getting hurt. It's like,
yeah, and that's where a lot of that fear is based on, is that we're social creatures. So if the rest of our social group is wounded or otherwise unable to protect or collect or etc., you're gonna have a fear of if they die, I die. What? But I think in co-op board games, the sense of cohesion is so important to actually getting the game done. Like we were talking about with Pandemic, do it right or you're done.
right.
And that's a healthy fear of failure. I think
Mhm.
it's still a legitimate fear.
Mhm.
I could keep talking for hours. I
with
literally
games
have a
like,
Twitch stream where I talk for hours. So like,
And
y'all
with
are gonna have to
games
interrupt
like
me.
and with games like Dead of Winter, like we were talking about earlier, it makes you want to care about others, but with that possible traitor mechanic, like they're always in the back of your mind.
It's like
Always, always in the back of the mind, you're like, I need to help this person because they're doing something that's going to help me. But if I help them too much, am I helping them screw me over in the end?
right, exactly.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's the best aspect of that game because you're just like, all right, do I want to send them out to this place, or are they just gonna mess things up for me on purpose?
Has there
Ugh.
ever been a board game for the movie The Thing?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, two.
it's not
Okay.
bad either.
There was one. It was an assault on whatever the base 31 or
Right.
someone screaming at me that I'm saying the wrong thing. And actually, there's a new one that it's either about to finish on Kickstarter or just finished. And it's basically the same game, and it's got the trader mechanic in it too.
I should
And
hope so.
the fancy all the fancy mid stuff, but it was pricey.
I'll bet.
The original one I have is it was still like $60 or $70, but okay, this was like the pledge was like 200. Like,
Good gravy. Goodness gracious me.
yeah, and you had to pay for the shipping from Sweden. So I'm like, no.
Wait. Does Wilford Brimley deliver it himself?
I'd
That's
pay
a
for that.
whole different. I think he's officially dead now, so that's a whole
I
other
don't care.
genre of game.
I don't care.
Will you
That
settle
money-
for a Kurt Russell lookalike? Because my father looks like Kurt Russell from that movie.
Yep.
Like
yep.
he has the hat and like the beard. My dad's had a beard since I was a baby, and I'm pretty sure that if he shaved his beard, there'd just be another beard underneath. Like he's got the Kurt Russell beard. He's got the shaggy hair, especially in quarantine. Like he had the hat. He had the like. It was so if you'll settle for that.
I will for $200, but I have to get the game, the special edition of the game, and he has to deliver it to you by hand.
Okay. Gotta wait till after the pandemic.
We'll start putting that together.
I think my dad will just be completely amused at the notion. He'll be like, "Yeah, okay." Yeah, okay. He's like, "I don't get it, but okay."
Right. It's
that would make one heck of a TikTok.
It would.
Russell lookalike delivers special edition of the game.
I also have been kind of making a small habit of taking pictures with somewhat lookalikes of celebrities. So I've got Will Wheaton and Alan Tudyk so far.
And almost Alan Tudyk.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry.
So Schmil Schmeaton and Schmal and Schmudik?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that was their names.
It's your story and you're sticking to it. Okay.
That's right. The Will Wheaton one, I was going to get a picture with him, and I looked up, and we were right under the light. I was like, hey, you mind if we scoot back a little bit out of the light? And he looked at me. He's like, yeah, let's do it. He knew exactly what I was doing.
Oh, goodness. Poor guy. He's probably gotten that a lot.
Oh yeah. And then speaking of getting it a lot, the other guy, I saw him at the bar, and I'm like, I look like Alan Tudyk. And they're like, oh yeah. I walked over to him. I was like, hey, and as soon as I said that, he was like, has anyone said I look like Alan Tudyk? I was like, you. So I got a picture with him, and I looked at the picture. I was like, what? And I looked at him, and he was like, yeah, I work on the smile because people ask me that all the time. I was like,
what a trooper.
What a good sport. Oh, my gosh.
Speaking of, Dale and Tucker, the board game would be a great game.
Oh, that would be hilarious. I finally watched that movie. Oh, my God. What a treat.
So good. So good. What a treat. They were both on Dirk Gently, actually. If you ever watched Dirk Gently, we're both on that.
I will trust you that is
excellent. So games.
I want to come back to that first Resident Evil game and how it kind of changed the face of horror games.
Yeah.
From that point forward.
Well, I was going to say, looking at some of the older horror games that came out, we can't talk about the present without talking about history. So looking at some of the stuff that came out before it, you have adventure games like Phantasmagoria. You have pseudo adventure games like Night Trap, and you have a game like Night Trap. That was a game. It was a thing that happened. It is a piece of gaming history.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And you have NES games like Clock Tower, where they set the stage in terms of making something more about escaping rather than dominating. You know, Phantasmagoria was a mature title, mostly because you saw boobs at one point.
And
Also, there was
boobs
a
are
lot. There was also a lot of like visceral murdering towards the end, and a genie. That was the weirdest part.
I will say this too. Growing up in the ¡80s, I cannot impress upon you enough how much boobs and horror go together. It's
Well,
important.
it is important. It is. I will, as a proud owner of my own set, horror and boobs go great
Hey,
together.
that's why I play all my horror games topless.
Exactly.
Mike knows. He tries to tell me to stop.
Listen,
I've stopped doing this.
you stop bothering.
I'm not gonna win.
Oh.
You glossed over it earlier. I think we got to talk about the Friday the 13th in the NES.
Okay.
Yep, that's one I actually haven't played that one. I haven't had a chance to play that one. So tell me more.
It's really, really bad. It's first of all, it's so bad.
I think the thought and effort was there. The execution is a different story.
Right.
Also, I'm not for sure if they had ever seen the movie or maybe
Just
a
heard
white.
about it from a friend.
Well, have you seen the Jason?
Mm.
He has a aqua blue mask.
Mhm.
I guess that would be the right color. It's more of a blue. It's not a white mask. It's a blue mask.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead, and I don't know if it's true, but I'm going to blame it on the limitations of the NES and the color palette, because you only get so many colors that you fit on the NES cartridge, and there are times when people get really inventive on how they use their colors or lack thereof.
Oh, honey, no, they had white and they didn't use it. I'm looking at a screen grab. So to me, this feels like maybe somebody saw a poster and it was using some of that dramatic lighting, and they're like, "Oh yeah, he totally looks like that." Like, I'll tell you about the movie later. Just start making the game.
I will say this too, that it could have very easily been like a project director that was like, you know what, this would look better with some color, and someone was like, but it's a white mask, and I said I want color on it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I'm scrolling through those screen grabs, honey, and ooh dear.
Yeah.
Like, at least the cover looks great. The cover for the game.
Yeah.
Destroy Jason if you can.
I think at that point in time, people didn't know what could make a game scary, at least not reliably. And I think what they went for was to make the game very difficult, make it very easy to die in the game. That way you would be like legitimately scared when the enemy showed up because of how easy it was to die. But it just became frustrating instead of scary.
Well, that was a lot of, you know what, I hate to say it, but that was a lot of Nintendo games.
Mhm.
Like, you know what? Everybody can like Mega Man all they want, but fuck that game. All right? I hated how hard they made those games back then.
Bring in the salt, okay.
Oh yeah, I got plenty of it. I mean, it's only in soy sauce, you know.
Yeah.
But God, and yes, and like those games right there, they were just super hard. And I mean, even
Do you know why? Do you know why?
Why is that?
Justify the price.
Yes, mostly because of the video game rental business.
Oh.
The companies were worried that if their games were, people would just rent them, buy them. So they upped the difficulty, especially true with the Disney Lion King and Aladdin games. They were made incredibly hard, so you wouldn't just rent them and beat them in a weekend. They wanted you to go buy it.
Damn it, Blockbuster.
Interesting. Yeah, that's not something I'd ever considered, but that makes a lot of sense. The
if a game took you 4 hours to beat, you didn't want to spend whatever NES game cost back then. But if a game took you 20 some hours to beat, then maybe you'd want to spend it. It's hours of entertainment versus the amount you spent on it. So,
and I think it did a disservice, particularly for the Friday the 13th game, looking at the mechanics and looking at the era it was released, in that something I've come across, because I suck at horror games, I play them a lot, but I suck at them, is that as you repeat yourself through a scary sequence, the familiar becomes less scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll get the shock initial, oh my god, Jason just killed me. But like if you're just, yep, oh my god, Jason just killed me. Oh my god, Jason, it's the whole meme of like, oh, you've seen a cutscene so long you can repeat back the enemy's voice, repeat back the enemy's lines in a mocking voice, and last you're here, and it becomes familiar, and you can easily reach past any shock or horror or fear, and it becomes annoying, And that's sort of a weakness of super hard. I'm going to say it's a weakness of hardcore games in that you cannot effectively reproduce a mood with a hardcore game, except for I'm playing a hardcore game.
Before we go deep into the video games here, I will have to say that was an LJN game. Who LJN was notorious for crapping out shitty games.
Yeah, especially shitty licensed games.
Yes. As quick as they could put it together, they threw it out there. Whether it made sense or not, they really didn't care.
Good old shovelware. Yeah. Well, shovelware is more like the Burger King game or something, but it's
at least that one only costs like $3.
Yeah, but yeah, and I think it's funny because like you can have on one end of the scale, you can have a tremendously cheap game, to throw together that's terrible. You can also have really expensive horror games that are terrible. And it all has to do with how you pull it off. One of the things that Michael was talking about earlier, sound design is your friend when you're talking about horror stuff. Even just tabletop stuff. Sound design is your best friend and your if you have a good sound designer, you can make a mediocre game excellent. And the same goes in the reverse. If you have a good game and you have a terrible sound designer, it can really tank it. And branching into other sections, I actually wrote an article a long time ago on how to make a good ambiance for running a horror game or playing horror games. And one of the things I emphasized was music. People love it, people hate it, but if you're going to choose something without lyrics, choose something with strange noises, choose something without a melody. The minute you get
so you're saying have John Carpenter do the game music from now on?
I mean, yeah. Or
No, I was serious.
Okay, or Akira Yamaoka, but that's the gentleman who did the music for Silent Hills 1, 3, and 4.
Oh,
In
I'm
fact,
with you now,
Akira Yamaoka was the producer for 4, which is why their sound design is so good. He was like, "No, we're making this," and they were like, "Oh, okay." But like you can have, some folks will put on the Monster Mash and go, "Why isn't this scary?" And I'll go, "Well, you're not actually listening to the Monster Mash. You're to a production of Monster Mash." But you have, because sound is what I got you on that one. Because sound is one of our strongest and most sensitive senses that we can share. That's the other thing, is that like you can't, except for very special people with consent, you cannot share tastes, you cannot share visions. You can't always share what you see, but you can often share what you hear. And there's, strange noises are strange to a lot of humans. There's an elk bugle that comes up in the Silent Hill 4 attract mode that I'm like, that's an elk looking for sexy time. But to other people who don't know that sound, it's frightening. Large animal making this horrible noise. And having that ambiance is part of what builds up that group hysteria, builds up that tension, that anticipation, the excitement for being scared and for doing scary things. And I think you can do that we were talking about it earlier with the spooky timer games. The spooky timer games.
we're back.
Oh, we're back.
Oh yeah.
It should have been Betamax, but
Oh, I mean, like, and I think that was the whole point of those games, right? Because I mean, that's why they called it atmosphere.
It was hitting a whole other set of senses.
And like, if you read the instruction manual for that game, it actually gives you setup instructions on how to set up not only the game but your house in order to play that game. Like turning out the lights, how to set people around the television to where they all get the maximum effect of what's coming off of it. They really set up, and like you're talking about sound design, that game had sound design. They knew exactly when to hit you with what. And then once you were expecting a sound, they would either not play it or play something different or play it off the time you expected it to. So, and I will say, when it comes to sound design, the other thing that you have to play with is silence, because you either never want there to be actual silence, like it's always like pretend silence in a way. Like it's silence, but there's always like a hum or crickets or static or some of white noise in the background. And then when you truly remove that last little bit and get actual silence, it's jarring.
It's deeply jarring. And I agree. I think silence and the concept of ma, which is emptiness, is used very effectively in Japanese horror games in particular because it's a Japanese concept. But it's this emptiness as its own thing. And you can use it in non-horror games as well. It was very effective in the game Journey. It was very effective. Like Journey is empty. It is an empty game, and it is wonderful. I play it periodically as a meditation exercise. For heaven's, it's 2 hours, and I do a lot of boop, 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 boop. But emptiness, in particular, is comforting and terrifying. So you have, like you were saying, you can have this long action sequence, and then if you have this particular long action sequence, depending on how you treat it. After the long action, if you have silence, it could be taken as a rest period, or depending on how that action sequence ended, it could be another setup to another dreadful moment.
Yeah, I agree. Well, going back to Left 4 Dead, they use that. There'll be music be playing, a lot of zombies, and it goes quiet, and there's not much, and then you kind of hear the sobbing of the witch. And she's around there somewhere, but you don't know where. And you're trying to sneak around her. Then, if you do happen to wake her, well,
don't startle the witch. Yeah,
good luck to you. But yeah, it was all about sound. It was all that move or that game was all about the sound in itself. It had its ups and downs, its peaks and valleys with the sound, and with the mood. It was.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I haven't played Left 4 Dead in a long time, but I think you make a great point. And the witch too, like just having the witch as a startled character. She's a jump scare the character.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you make a great point where pairing it with that silence and her sobbing is a master stroke. I think that's a way to build that anticipation, to build that not desire to be scared, but anticipation of being scared. Because half of humor and half of horror is anticipation. And one's a build up for a joke and one's a build up for screaming and peeing your pants. It's I have to admit my favorite genre of movie is actually black comedy, where it dances, like it doesn't just toe the line, it like skips between the line. But I think there's like, you have sound design is so elemental. Like you can have games with the timers, you can have even just listening to the soundtrack from Silent Hill, which I do because I'm that person. It's terrifying. It's all these industrial noises set to what you guess maybe a beat, and then oh dear God, what is falling apart behind me? What's falling apart in front of me? And it's a make or break for a game for me. I think. I got myself lucky to be among hearing, but yeah.
I can't think of any of the names of the tabletop role-playing games off the top of my head, but just to give you an idea of how important sound design is, there are a couple that actually give you ideas for a soundtrack in the player's handbook.
Oh, a lot like the World of Darkness. They give a ton of recommendations.
World of Darkness, for example, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't think of it off the top of my head, but yeah, the World of Darkness books will give you an idea for soundtracks for the games, and I think playing the correct soundtrack when you're playing a tabletop role-playing game or just a tabletop game can take it from just, oh, this is a tabletop game with a horror theme, to actually having a horror experience just by having that correct ambiance while you play it. You turn the lights down, you turn the music up, and let your mind wander.
I hate to be that guy.
Be that guy.
You know who's really, really good at that? Matt Mercer.
Yeah.
When he runs his games, he has a constant soundtrack playing.
Mm-hmm.
And he has sounds fit for each situation that he can think of. And I've actually even heard him utilize the silence before.
Oh, good.
Because like something was going to happen, and then like one of his players was even like, "Wait, where did the music go?" and he was just kind of sat there, and he was like, "It's like, oh, you son of a bitch." So yeah, he really uses like for like role playing games. He really hits it really well with sounds, with music, because it's not just a musical soundtrack. He'll put in like the sounds of a swamp or
or a tavern or a
yes, exactly.
Yeah, not hashtag not a sponsor, but Sirenscape. If you haven't used it in your role playing games, Sirenscape is a free app that you can download, and then you can buy sound packs for it if you so wish. But Sirenscape is an app that does exactly that. So
See, I've been working on my Foley artistry this whole time, and I didn't have to make the sound of a door creaking. I'm pissed. My vocal cords are so mad.
So yeah, they will basically you have like a baseline, like a soundtrack or whatever, depending on what area you're in, and then you can add in, oh, this is the sound of a bugbear growl, this is the sound of clanking, this is the sound of this, and you can like fade things in and fade things out as the action changes. So if sound design is important to you in your tabletop role-playing games, I would recommend giving Sirenscape a chance. You got to put some work into it, but it really does change.
Can I just get that and then hire a DJ?
Yes, that would be excellent. Oh my God.
I really want to. I kind of want to now. I kind of want to make a big deal about a game once and just get a DJ, someone who is trained at DJing, and just be like, here are your tracks. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I will send you like, hey, this is going to be scary. Like, all right, man, I got you. And
it's like, just 24 hours of Thriller.
It's a haunted house. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just a. So, no, wait, no.
wrong.
No, wrong guy.
Try again.
Yeah.
So you already got my player over there twitching. Stop.
So I've run a couple of tabletop games myself, and a lot of tabletop games for about 15. But anyway, that's beside the point.
You started when you were 7?
I was not young. I was 15. I was tender and young, but not tender and mild. Okay, call me tender and spicy. So having run the games for a long time, the nerdiest thing that I've done for setting up for like a horror sequence is I practice the NPC dialogue while I have the music playing. I did that for a game that wasn't explicitly a horror game, but I was running a nightmare sequence for one of the characters. And I practiced like 3 or 4 times the dialogue that I was going to have the NPC say. And I got it down and when it finally happened, I got it right down to the second before she was completely in flames and like he was almost consumed and like, oh, I run brutal games, like don't even. But like if you're running a tabletop game, don't be ashamed. Practice your NPCs. They're characters. Have fun with them.
Oh yeah.
Like I had a question if anybody was running music or sounds during their board gaming session, because I'm usually not in charge of that. So
depending on the board game, and actually once again hashtag not a sponsor, but Sirenscape has specific sound packs you can buy just for certain.
Sometimes I think he says that because he's getting a check, but he doesn't want to split it with me.
He doesn't want to share it, yeah.
Yeah.
So Sirenscape, for example, you can buy a sound pack for the game Boss Monster.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's got a nice little 8-bit soundtrack to it, and it's got different sounds that are specific for certain cards, like if they're played, or like it's got a little level up sound that you press a button and the level up sound plays for when like somebody levels up and stuff like that. So it's neat, you know what I mean? And like I've definitely done that for certain especially when we were playing Betrayal Legacy, which kind of borders on being a tabletop role-playing game instead of just a board game.
Oh, I will argue that if you're doing it right, it is a role-playing game. But
yeah,
there are some people that like to keep that aspect out of it, and that's cool.
But even if I'm just playing the regular Betrayal game, like I'll usually, especially after I got my record player, I would play like the soundtrack to like the Stranger Things or Castlevania and things like that, like, you know, in the background while we played those games.
Reminds me, I need to get the Symphony of the Night vinyl. We have a record player too.
I've done on a few occasions. We had kind of a Harry Potter deck building game night. We had like 2 or 3 games going on. We had the Harry Potter, the soundtrack going on in the background. I've done it with Jaws. Gotta have that soundtrack.
Speaking of music and horror, that's great. He did a great job with that. Whoever that, I think he'll be famous someday. I'm sure the guy that did the music for that.
Some John Williams guy.
Some guy.
So you guys were talking about role-playing games, something I normally won't jump in because I said earlier I don't like it, but there is a game I've been playing this year with the Crisis. It's called The 1,000-Year-Old Vampire, and I had to go get this the book so I could have the right information. It's a role playing game where you play as a vampire, and usually you have to create how you were created as a vampire, the characters involved, and as you go through it, you have to go to a certain page, and depending on how you write and how it goes, you go through a different page in the book. And your life points is kind of like your memory. And once you run out of memories, the game is over.
That's
But
kind
for someone who's, I normally don't like role playing games, mostly because there's some jackass just there not to play the game. They're just there to have fun.
just fucking at me.
It's,
Brutal. Okay.
I mean, I'm not pointing at anyone in particular, but
Go on.
but it was a friend of mine who owns a game shop here in Columbus. He was able to get some copies and picked one up, and it was an amazing experience to kind of. And I'm a bit of a, at least like to think I'm a writer, so it's a good writing experience because you're basically writing the diary of this as you go through it, and especially in these solo periods, solo games is basically what we got.
Yep.
So it's something I've really enjoyed.
Who made that game?
I'm trying to read
I
it.
know. I keep asking you as soon as you put it down.
Yeah. It's here. Tim Hutching.
Okay. Who was the publisher?
It was mostly self-published. So
Okay.
if you look up Tim Hutchins Google, it'll get you. You'll find it. He's made a few other games, but they're mostly just self-published. You can see the book is just
It looks like a
beautiful.
position book.
Handsome.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Did you put it down? When was it published?
This year. I know that one. This year. Anything else I'm making up?
You know what? That's great.
Fair. Entirely fair.
Well, that sounds like a perfect game to come out. I mean, like if you're going to have something that you're going to play on your own, especially to be that involved, like that's amazing.
Yeah, I think it was. Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna say it almost feels like an extended writing exercise. Really.
It really is. That's really kind of what it comes down to. But it's just really fun, and it kind of pushes you to do things you wouldn't normally do. You may have to kill someone. So do you do it because you're a vampire, or do you do it some other way? You kill that person. The book is telling you have to kill someone, one way or the other.
I'll have to try that sometime.
Yeah, that actually sounds like a cool exercise too. Like even if it's just like, oh, I'm gonna flip through this and go, ooh, oh. Work out those vocal cords after doing all that Foley artistry in my gaming.
As long as we're bringing tabletop RPGs into it, a little bit about bringing horror to the tabletop role-playing game experience. You can't just throw zombies and skeletons at your players and expect it a horror experience. I know Baron and I have talked about it before, where if you are playing D&D and you throw zombies at your characters, it's not horror. I mean, like, they are fodder. You know what I mean? Like, they're one of the easiest monsters to kill. They don't really pose much of a threat. But there was a YouTuber who explained how to do zombies different.
And I will do it. I will do it to you fucks. Get ready.
All right.
That actually makes it a horror game. It turns D&D into like the horror, and it's scary.
It's terrifying. Terrifying. You keep talking, I'll find out who it is.
It's Z Bashu, I believe his name is.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah, the Animated Spellbook is the series, if you've ever heard of it. It's pretty great. And he talks about how to change zombies to make it a horror experience rather than just a, like I said, fodder.
So let me say how I would do it and see how wrong I got it. Okay. So the way I would do that is I would take the time, describe what the zombies look like as they're approaching. I would take the time to establish that this town has lost people one way or another and that the zombies return. I would also take the time to describe how the zombies are consuming a living person or a living thing in excruciating, uncomfortable detail. The idea is to focus on them as monsters rather than, as you were putting it, as fodder. That's how
that's all great. These all great, and that's all things you can do on top of what Z tells you to do.
Oh, I got it wrong. Okay.
But it's also the only option that you had available to you is to actually be a good DM and try to provide that to you. That's great. But
Z actually changes the mechanics to make them scary.
So does he actually change their challenge rating and gives them powers, or?
If anything, their challenge rating goes down a little bit, but it's just the way they work and the way he makes the infection mechanic work and the way he makes the horde work. Because when you're staring at a group of zombies and you're playing D&D, usually you know once you kill all those zombies, you can move on, and that's all the zombies there were. Especially if you're like in a dungeon. With the way Z changes it, you always know there is a horde present somewhere. And the more noise you make fighting zombies or doing anything else increases the chances of you encountering that horde, because the horde heard you and is now heading your direction. And the way he changes the mechanics, a handful of them isn't hard to deal with, but the more of them that there are, the more overwhelming it can become. Just like in a zombie movie or a zombie television series, you know what I mean? Like, in The Walking Dead, when they come across one walker, they just stab it in the head with a screwdriver and it's done. But once, you're facing the horde, that's when it gets...
So then I would argue, because I like to argue, I would argue that it's no longer about the zombies. It's about being overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
Which is actually what zombies are about.
That and I think that and a lot of monsters from around that era were about assimilation. So like part of what makes zombies so scary is that you become one. Like when they bite you, it's an inevitability that eventually you're going to turn. And a part of the mechanics that he changes that infection mechanic, and you can truly become a zombie pretty quickly if you don't deal with the issue.
Anybody listening, feel free to track that video down. Watch
I'm probably going to link it in the description.
Oh, please do. Give it a like. Subscribe to this guy. He's got great ideas, but this was, oh my gosh. I watch his videos anyways, but there was something about this video. It was like, oh, this is visceral. I love it. And
once again, hashtag not a sponsor.
Right. Yeah. No. Oh God.
Z is not paying us.
I hope there comes a day when other YouTube gets sponsored.
So, kind of in that realm, but a little different. Have you guys ever played Zombicide Black?
I've seen it on shelves before, but I've never played any of the Zombicides.
So, Zombicide, I know Brad's played some of the Barrett's played some of the Zombicide stuff there. It's a very, I don't want to say generic, kind of it's almost like a dungeon game, really, but you're like in a city killing zombies. And Zombicide Black Plague takes it back to a fantasy element. And it's usually like a necromancer that's bringing all the zombies up that you have to go kill, which I kind of like better. The Zombicide was fine, but it was just, like I said, kind of generic. You're killing zombies and getting to the goal.
Yeah, it's about escaping, not necessarily.
Escaping. But when you get into the Black Plague, of course, you get the fantasy elements where you may have, an archer or wizard or, a big brute elf or something like that. That's more fun to play, but you also have more villain versus, you have a reason for the horde of zombies that come at you, random zombies in a town. But I really enjoyed that kind of different take on zombies. Honestly, we could talk for 2 hours on zombie games.
Yeah.
But, Lordy, they just won't go away, just like zombies.
We're getting overwhelmed here.
Yeah, I know, right?
I am turning into a zombie game.
I'm gonna turn myself into a Kickstarter mini at this rate.
Oh,
I'm high quality, which means I have no substance. So you were pointing out something about assimilation being a horror thing, and I want to branch into another thing that is my favorite thing. Star Trek. The Borg were literally about assimilation, and they tried so hard to make them the zombies of the Trek universe. And then they got Picard back, and like as soon as he was no longer Locutus of Borg, I was like, oh, you can be cured? Whatever. They're not scary. They're kittens.
Yeah, they took away a lot of substance from the Borg when they did that. They should have chose one of the other crew members and then just sacrificed him to him.
Yeah, just made him permanent. I mean, they killed Tasha Yar, no problem. Like, yes, I'm salty about that. I will always be salty about the death of Tasha Yar.
I think she had bigger and better things to go on to.
Like,
Yeah.
Joe, that she was, and I don't know. You lost me.
Right.
You lost me.
You know, coming back to play Romulan. That's what he had to.
Listen, that gave me very confused feelings when I was younger.
Oh, I wasn't confused at all. Oh.
That's fair.
Uh,
Not about sharp haircuts. But yeah, I think it's funny that there's a fear of assimilation, and thinking about zombies and horror games in particular, I think there's a lot to be said about games that treat zombies as fodder. And that's most games out there. Like, but I think Res Evil and Last of Us treated zombies in a more particular way. Yeah, I know, weird convergence. Just bear with me.
No, I don't. For some reason, I was having a brain fart, and I was like, "Last of Us. What is that game? What is that game?"
Oh, yeah.
Last of Us is where Naughty Dog took your feelings, crushed them, threw them into a blender, and then poured them down the sink. But
First 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Thanks for the warning, Mike.
Thanks. So I think zombies in general have just been used as fodder for the most part because there is a fear of assimilation. But in games like Res Evil, where they're more isolated, where they're more terrifying, they're an emphasis to isolation, and I feel like that's different than assimilation. You know, particularly in Last of Us, the zombies being around emphasizes the loneliness of the survivors, and that loneliness is painful and scary. And I think what makes those zombie stories so effective is focusing on the survivors either rising above or succumbing to baser, more violent tendencies. You know, am I the monster? If you treat the zombies as a thing to constantly be shot and mowed down, oh, they're coming, you desensitize to the horror that's available, but making it a more focused, more intimate story about isolation, about rejecting assimilation, if you want to go that far. But you can make an extremely effective horror story about zombies, but there's so few and far between. Like, I've just named 2 games. I can't think of a lot of others.
Resident Evil also changed the mechanics of zombies a lot to make them not fun. So, like, you can tell a lot with Resident Evil by the amount of zombies that are in that game. Because if you actually count how many zombies are in the game in total, it's not a ton.
It's like 20.
The other thing is they're not easy to kill. And I think a lot of that has to do with the mechanics of how you operate your character, less than the mechanics. Because with those tank controls and how you operate your character and like the lack of an aiming mechanic altogether.
You're almost a Jill sandwich.
Yeah. And then in the Resident Evil remake, they brought about the Crimson to where even if you did dispose of a zombie, if you didn't go through the process of making sure to remove the head or burn the zombie, it would come back again as something even scarier. So the zombies in Resident Evil definitely weren't fodder just because they weren't easy to kill and there weren't enough of them to be fodder.
Right. And well, having those separate mechanics made them more it made it a more intense game, by going, oh shit, what kind of zombie is this, rather than, oh, zombie, gotta shoot in the head. What kind of thing is this? How do I react? Even for a moment of going, what should I do? Brings a little more of the horror home.
And if you paid attention, some of those zombies even had individual personal stories. You could tell who they were before they became a zombie because of how few of them. But Brad, you were going to say something. I interrupted you.
Actually, I think Mike was about to say.
Well, when you were talking about the isolation, it just reminded me of a video game and a board, but This War of Mine. If anyone has played it, I mean, there's not really zombies. It's a scary thing is war. Yeah, it's war and people around. But that game, the board game and the video game, both, man, those really get you. It's one of the few board games I've really gotten into because it's kind of a co-op. I don't know, almost a role-playing game. You're kind of just reading a book. You're passing this book around, and
are you secretly a role-playing gamer? Or are you just trying to trick us?
As long as I have to play D&D, yeah.
Okay.
With certain people that have scarred me.
That's fair.
But no, the board game version of Swore of Mine, it's really. You can really get into it, and there are situations where you're like uncomfortable on what to do because I mean, you may, do you want to feed this person or do you need to keep the food for yourself? You get some very tough decisions that really get you involved. It's an interesting experience.
Yeah, that does sound really good. I can imagine that that would make for really heavy sessions of playing where you have to like, okay, I gotta take a break right now. Like, taking breaks is part of what makes playing through horror games for me more bearable. But like something like that, I would be like, okay, the spook timer's gone off. It's time for me to take a break. Okay, walk away from the table for like 5 minutes. That's actually something I want to note for anybody playing a game, anybody running a game. Remember to give your players an out. Give them the space that, like, if they're too scared, you don't know what they're dealing with. Like if they're too scared for something, remember to give them the space to be like, I gotta take a break or I can't do this. You know?
I mean, like, don't forget we're all trying to have fun. You know what I mean? Like, if the horror games, be it tabletop, video game, role playing, whatever, we're all trying to be scared fun, not
I will say this, that when it comes to themes like that, where it could be possibly triggering, you really should set up a safe word. And I mean, that may sound funny, but a safe word is perfect for situations like that.
Interesting that you mentioned that. There have been a number of games now, tabletop role-playing games in particular, that have been using the X card. Everybody has an X card.
Okay.
It's just a card that has an X on it, and at any given point, that person, for whatever reason, may hold up that X card and the subject must be changed or the break must be taken. Just no explanation, no, I had this happen to me, so I don't want to talk about it. No, this thing happened and I don't want to talk about it. Just X card. Pause, rewrite, change subject, whatever.
Now, I do have to say, too, that before the game, again, we're going to get into, safe word related context, but just like any good thing that would involve a safe word, pre-negotiations are very important. You should be very transparent with your players with the kind of content that you are going to be putting in this game. And if you're like, if this is going to be one of those where you're just trying to work with your players to make a good story for everybody, then maybe if you say, hey, well, this is going to involve some highly graphic sexual content, and you're like, well, I'm not comfortable with that. It's like, okay, well, then I'll cut that out. Or be like, look, this is what I'm laying out. This is the game I'm running. Who's interested? And if someone's like, well, I don't really want to play that, and be like, okay, we'll get you next
Love
game.
you, see you later.
Right. Just you have to be transparent at the beginning of these games.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of there's a escape room game, basically. It's called Escape Tales: The Awakening.
Ooh.
And that game, you really need to know what you're getting in the game. You're the father of a daughter who's in a coma. You're given a book basically that you can go into her mind and figure out why she's in a coma. It's good, but man, it's
brutal.
It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone.
Yeah, I've become a great big softie ever since I've had a daughter. Like, I used to never cry at anything or like anything like that, and now, like, if a commercial hits me wrong,
you're just like,
it's what the dad feels. Like, I immediately start crying.
I'm going to jump in here. I've been holding on to something. So, because you brought that up. So, firstly, related to this, there was one video game that made me sob like a baby because I just recently had a baby girl, and that was the Dead Island game. The trailer for Dead Island.
Yeah, the commercial. Yeah.
Oh my god. Also, Dead Island was one of the only games, one of the two games that I actually had to stop playing because it gave me and it goes into the whole, like you were saying, with the isolation. Like, because you can get a little crew of NPCs that are at a home base, but they're like, well, we need these supplies, and it's like, okay, well, I'll go out and get them. But then all of a sudden you're out on alone. There was a scene where this was the scene that made me stop. You know how, like, you go on a beach and then you have these changing rooms. So in Dead Island, they have these changing rooms, and I heard like the moaning of a zombie getting back into sound and how it's used. So I'm like, aha, he's in there. I'm a get him. And I like kick open the door and I'm like, there's nothing here. I turn around and it's in my face. I'm like, oh god! I kill it and I'm like, and we're done. I can't do this anymore. I can't do it. And it's like, but through the whole thing, the way they use sound and the way they kept you isolated, and how, like, you just couldn't see just zombies just walking around. You definitely couldn't see them all. I had this state of anxiety throughout the whole thing. The whole thing.
And you're just like, I need the biggest cup of valerian root you've ever seen.
Oh,
and even
God.
then,
was crazy.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned video games because there are some mechanics in video games that give you that moment, and it's literally the pause button. But moreover, it's the map. I've been finding in the games that I've been playing through, like Clock Tower 2, Clock Tower in the United States, but we have the Japanese version as well. Clock Tower, surprisingly terrifying. But in games like Silent Hill, Res Evil, a couple others, you give yourself a break by looking at the map. Pausing doesn't quite do it because you're still like halfway in the action. But when you go to the map, you give yourself the space to think, you give yourself the space to look ahead, and you can give yourself the space to calm down. Like if you're ever watching a horror streamer just like, I'm just gonna flick to the map real quick, that means they need a mental break, and that is the easiest way to do it.
Right.
So and feel free to give yourselves the mental break. Like please don't be that person who's like, I'm gonna tough it out. Like nope, nobody's watching. You don't have to tough it out ever. Be a sissy. Hang out. Like stop playing if you don't like. No judgment.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like there was a reason my channel is called Scaredy Cat, because I am afraid of all the games I play.
It's all about enjoyment anyway. Like the whole point of playing a horror game is to be scared in a way that's fun. And if you're being scared in a way that's not fun, there's no reason to soldier.
Which actually comes to the other game that I had to quit because it kind of gave me the creeps. And it wasn't, it was, I guess it was scary, but it was scary in like a really creepy way. And you may be familiar with the game. I believe it was done by Rockstar, and it's called Manhunt.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I played that one, but I'm a little nervous about playing that one.
Oh, man. I felt just gross through the whole thing.
So you're the killer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I seem to recall that one had some
force to be a killer. Yeah.
Talk about sound design.
Yeah. It was.
And all the kill screens. I mean, like, if you play that game, not only the sound design, but the visual design, that entire game looks like a snuff film. Like, anytime you actually commit a kill, like, the camera's angle will change to give you an angle of the kill. Like, it gives you the Dutch angles, the low from up angles. Like,
well, the idea is that they have cameramen hidden all over the map. And when you go to do this kill, the cameraman pops out and gets a close-up of the kill.
And they make the kills extremely graphic.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's almost too spoops for me. Almost. Yeah. But I may have to play it. So. Like, listen, again, the reason it's called Scaredy Cat.
The only reprieve you really get is something you were actually talking about earlier with the repetition of something. You lose the shock of it after a while. A lot of the kills in Manhunt get over and over again.
Okay.
So, like, by the 5th time you kill someone with a plastic bag, like, shoving it over their head and suffocating them with it isn't as shocking anymore. So that's kind of something that makes it not as scary, in my opinion.
Depends on your background. My mom actually witnessed a boy choke to death on a balloon when she was younger, so she can't take that kind of gore. Yeah. So, like, it all depends on who's playing and what they've been through. So.
Yeah, it was rough. It was a rough game.
Yeah, that sounds brutal as hell.
Oh yeah. Well, it caught a lot of flack in the media when it.
I'm not surprised.
Like, you know how
there's
video games that over time that have caught a lot of video games make you violent, and like it's a whole thing. Obviously, they don't. It's been disproven, but like the media is always going to hit it, especially when certain games come out over time. Mortal Kombat got it hard. Night Trap got it hard. Manhunt was one of those games that got a lot of media attention.
It's funny because there's also a game that got it so hard. Little bit of trivia here. There's a game called, and it's kind of a horror game. It's more of a puzzle game with horror elements. It was originally made way back when as a PlayStation game. And I know I say way back when and say PlayStation, but it was originally made, when it was made in Japan, they deemed it too graphic. It was just too awful. And so they had the creator edit the version and put that out to market. Well, the thing is that he was still the one delivering the disc. And so he put out his highly graphic version, which sold like hotcakes because apparently the censorship board had no idea what they were talking about. So
they generally don't.
A little bit of a column A, a little bit of column B. You will always know your own horror level, but games are not always good at expressing their horror level. So
Yeah, my horror level is usually around Scooby Doo.
Fair.
That's where I tend to.
Yeah,
Turns out it was D&D the whole time.
which, by the way, we're talking about horror and everything like that. D can also really, really good horror. I mean, a lot of people kind of like separate themselves from the game by like looking at it like a bunch of numbers and it's high fantasy. But like I was saying before to somebody, it's like you walk into a room and you see this mass of just gross tentacles with a dead, decaying body in the center of it, kind of flowing right towards you. And there, all you have is a sword to protect yourself. And essentially, I just described a gelatinous cube coming after a human fighter. And it's like it's terrifying if you like put yourself in that shoes of that character. But a lot of people kind of.
I think that comes down mostly to storytelling. I think D&D as a game is poorly designed for horror. The fact that you have a power skill, the fact that after level 3 you suddenly become a version of a superhero, I think that makes it I think that puts a lot more on the shoulders of the DM to make it a horror game. There are thousands of role-playing games out there that can do that for you.
Yeah.
Dread is a wonderful game.
I will sing the praises of Dread till the day I die.
We have 2 copies by accident.
Nice.
Even if you really want to lean into the D&D flavor, you can go to Forbidden Lands, where it's a post-apocalyptic world where everything's going to kill you. There's a ton of horror to be had. If you want to go modern, Delta Green, that is modern Cthulhu, and if you do it right, it's freaking terrifying. But I'm gonna stick with my argument that D&D as a system, not designed for horror. It puts a lot of work, makes a lot of work. I was expecting an argument, guys. Come on.
No, you're 100% right. I mean, the closest it gets to horror is like, I guess maybe Curse of Strahd, but honestly, Curse of Strahd's kind of camp.
I will say this: Pathfinder, which is D&D. I don't care any of you nerds out there listening to this. Pathfinder is D&D. Shut your mouth.
It's 3.75.
Yeah. So Pathfinder had an expansion that added horror aspects to it. So like, sanity and mutations or whatever, or
this happened to be the Carrion Crown storyline?
No, I don't think so. It's not a storyline. It's man, I wish I knew what it was right off the top of my head, but it was a source book and not necessarily like a campaign book.
Gotcha.
So.
Their Carrion Crown campaign was very strong in terms of horror. But again, it relied a lot on the GM's ability to make it a horror game.
Gotcha.
The first book dealt with a haunted prison, and I have to say I had the best part in that, because as the DM, I ended up making all of the players feel terrible because they were so busy just crashing through this prison, crashing, and I had them come across the warden's wife, and they were like, "Oh yeah, what about the secret passage?" And I was like, and then she crumbles in misery as she realized she had no reason to be trapped here for all these years, and they were like, "Oh, we're assholes." And I was like, "Yes, thank you."
Oh, you know what? I think it was straight up called Horror Adventure.
Oh, snap.
But anyway, what I was trying to say was there's 100 things you can do in Pathfinder and things like that. We change the mechanic of the zombies to make them scarier, add a sanity meter, things like that. But if you really want to run a game with the intent of making it scary, the intent of running a horror game, in my opinion, you should just make something different, run something different. D&D, it's like, okay, this thing change that you make it to it will make it work enough. But if you run something different, something like Dread, something like Call of Cthulhu, something built to be a horror game, you're going to get a much better horror experience out of it than trying to tweak D&D to fit your purpose.
You can take an engine out of a Maserati and put in a hybrid, but it's no longer a Maserati at that point,
Right.
You want to do that work as a DM, I commend you for it.
Mm-hmm.
I am lazy, and I want my spoops handed to me, so...
I just want to do the thing. Whatever the thing we're doing, that's what...
I need to get you a spoon for Halloween now.
I actually have two giant spoons in my house right now. I don't need any more. I literally had 2 separate people send me giant spoons as birthday gifts one year. And I have threatened people with said spoons, but I have not heard anybody with said spook yet being the operative.
I mean, you can always take something that's not scary and make it scary by making small changes. I mean, you have a game like Castlevania 2, a terrible night to have a curse.
That is a horrible name for a game.
It's not the name of the game, you know it. But Castlevania 2, I mean, like, it was really poorly received because it was, I guess, an attempt to do a horror game, and it was really poorly done. And later on, it was revisited, and a bunch of fans came out and made a bunch of changes to the game, and it made it a better game, but honestly, it still wasn't as good as games that did horror well, versus, you know, you can come out and make the change to it, but you're still only going to reach a certain level.
Right, and I think, so it's funny because we were actually recently playing through Castlevania 2 because we made our front porch a Castlevania level for Halloween because we are those people. And Castlevania 2 is an interesting departure from Castlevania 1 in that its difficulty lies in more hidden mechanics rather than stuff that was in Castlevania 1. In Castlevania 1, you just had to get real good at jumping and not getting hit. With Castlevania 2, there was a timing.
Every Nintendo platforming game ever.
Listen, I know my work.
I didn't mean that accusatory.
No.
You erupted an epiphany in my head. Like, oh my god.
So in Canic, as far as timing was concerned, you also didn't have a map. You also had different areas that you could start from and get your ass beat. You found the right way, and then you still didn't get the good ending unless you did it under a certain number of days. There was a lot going against it as far as an easily enjoyable game. Yeah, Simon's Quest was one. It's actually what we modeled our front porch after. I actually just finished making a painting of what a horrible night to have a curse, and that's currently sitting drying out. Because again, we are those nerds. But I think with Castlevania, I'm going to argue that Castlevania is an action game based on Curse of Strahd.
Yeah, it's more horror adjacent, a horror game.
Mm-hmm.
But is that going to be your shirt, horror adjacent?
Well, I've been using adjacent to describe myself for a lot of things. Like I'm goth adjacent. So I'm not really goth, but I have plenty of people that are. And
I was like, you're not ready to commit to the platform boots yet? Okay.
Right.
I
But
have a pair somewhere.
if somebody puts eyeliner on you, you're not going to.
Right.
There you go. There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
You're not quite into the clove cigarettes, but you dig some really strong incense.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's legit though.
Yeah, no.
It's like we can laugh, but yeah, no, that's real.
I know what I'm about.
All right. Well, so definitely the season has called for this, or I probably would have never agreed to get the shit scared out of me throughout this podcast. We have delved into the world of horror and games, tabletop video, and RPGs. And, you know, I think I'm coming out of this feeling a little better about the genre. There's definitely some stuff I want to try, and hopefully that the people listening have gotten a lot of ideas, you know, add to their shelf. I know I have. Yeah, what do you got?
Yeah, if not some things to add to your shelf, then maybe some ways to change the way you're playing what you're playing to get some more enjoyment out of them, or other people as you're playing to get some more enjoyment out of them. So thanks for tuning in. Kat, where can people find you on the internet if they like what you had to say?
So you can find me at scaredy_cat on Twitch. That's what I broadcast on Tuesday nights around 8. That's SKAREY_KAT. You can also find me at Caffeine Witch on Twitter or on Instagram, also at Caffeine Witch. And I just want to leave you a note. Work on your Foley artistry. It's fun.
And silent. Oh God, that was creepy. God.
Now I'm gonna have to work on keeping that one in when I edit. Truncate silence button is gonna hurt me on that one.
Where can we find Mike?
Yeah.
You can find me at Board Game Goon on Twitter. Prepared to be underwhelmed. I get moods where I do a lot. There's nothing.
It's true, but at least if you go and follow him now, you got a lot of backlog until he gets Randy. So,
and then that is until he changes Twitter handle to the bombastic board game geek hyphenated.
Should I spell out?
Yes.
Not have that.
Yes,
Just spell
yes.
out.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So anyway, make sure to check us out. Check out some of our older podcasts. If you haven't, share it with somebody you think would like it. And check out our Extra Life stream, which is coming out on November 7th. I'll be streaming for 24 hours straight. Some of these wonderful people may or may not be joining me during that 24 hours, including Kat and maybe Brad rejoining me for a sequel to our City of Mist game. So
I will also say that I now have, I don't know when this is going to pop out, but I know I haven't pushed it yet, but I do now have a YouTube channel. I don't have a URL yet, but you can look for Dad from a Distant and or just Baron Kane, and I'm on there. Just look me up, subscribe, and feel free to laugh at me while I'm trying to teach valuable life lessons to my daughter.
check out all these links and more in the description down below, and we will see you next time. Bye.
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 Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Go have a spoopy time.
Wait, okay, did you get to 13?